Marcus Hale was 39 years old, and for 11 years he had mopped the floors of the same mathematics building at Caldwell University without anyone asking him a single question that mattered. He wore the gray uniform. He pushed the yellow cart with the squeaky left wheel. He nodded when faculty passed him in the corridor, and they nodded back the way people nod at furniture, politely, without seeing. His name badge said Marcus in block letters. His annual salary was $34,200. He drove a 2009 Civic with a cracked dashboard that he had fixed with electrical tape and intention. He had a mop. He had a routine. He had, as far as anyone at Caldwell University could tell, nothing else. What none of them knew, not the department chair, not the dean, not the graduate students who sometimes stepped over his bucket without looking up from their phones, was that Marcus Hale held two things they had never thought to ask about. A solved version of the equation that had been sitting unfinished on Dr. Raymond Pruitt's chalkboard for 6 weeks, and a history that predated every credential in that building. On a Tuesday evening in October, Marcus stayed late to buff the second-floor corridor. Dr. Pruitt's classroom door was open, as it always was when the professor had forgotten something and gone back to retrieve it. The chalkboard was visible from the hallway. The partial differential equation sat there like an accusation, the same half-finished structure it had been for a month and a half. Marcus set down his buffer. He stepped inside. He picked up the chalk. What happened next would cost Raymond Pruitt everything he thought he'd built his career upon. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning light came through the narrow windows of the facility's break room at 6:45, falling in pale strips across the table where Marcus Hale sat with a cup of coffee and a composition notebook, the same kind he had used since he was 12 years old. He wrote in it most mornings before his shift, nothing dramatic, just problems, sequences, proofs that he worked through the way other men work through crossword puzzles, not for any audience, just for the satisfaction of the thing resolving cleanly. He had a gift for resolution. That was the most honest way to put it. His grandmother, Evelyn Hale, had been a schoolteacher in Memphis for 31 years, and she used to tell him when he was small and restless and too quick for his own good, Marcus, a mind is a tool. You sharpen it or you let it rust. Either way, it's your choice and yours alone. He had heard that sentence so many times as a boy that it had stopped being a sentence and become something structural, like a crossbeam running through the center of him. Evelyn had been gone for 4 years now, but the crossbeam held. He capped his pen and finished his coffee and gathered his cart from the supply closet. Caldwell University's mathematics building, Dormer Hall, was a 4-story block of limestone and glass built in 1968 that smelled of chalk dust and old carpet and the particular loneliness of academic ambition. Marcus had cleaned it for 11 years. He knew which pipes knocked in the cold, which classrooms flooded in heavy rain, which professors stayed past midnight, which ones never came in before 10. He knew the building the way you knew anything you had maintained long enough, not from the outside, but from the inside where the real structure lived. He knew Dr. Raymond Pruitt. Pruitt was the department's star. 53 years old, published in 11 journals, the recipient of 2 national fellowships and a departmental chair, who introduced him at every public function as though reading from a monument inscription. He was 6 feet tall with silver hair and the kind of easy authority that came not from effort but from never having been seriously questioned. He was not unkind to Marcus. He was something worse. He was incurious. Marcus had been cleaning his classroom for a decade, and Pruitt had never once asked him his name without checking the badge. In September of that year, Pruitt had written an incomplete equation on the board in room 214, a third-order nonlinear partial differential equation that he had described to his graduate seminar as resistant to conventional approach. He had left it there as a kind of ongoing provocation, a reminder to his students that mathematics still held problems that didn't yield easily. Every few days he would add a line, cross it out, stand back and look at it. It had been 6 weeks. The equation remained incomplete. Marcus had looked at it the first day it appeared. He had looked at it every day since. He had not said anything to anyone about what he saw in it. His mother, Clara, worked at a dry cleaner in Charlotte, which is where Marcus had grown up before a series of events that he did not discuss moved him to Raleigh and then to Milford, where Caldwell University sat on 17 acres of old Carolina landscape. Clara called him every Sunday. She knew what her son was. She had always known, the way certain mothers know, not because they understand the specifics, but because they understand the source. "You still mopping floors?" she had asked him last Sunday, not unkindly. "Still mopping floors," he had said. She had been quiet for a moment. "Then, baby, the floor knows what touched it." He had laughed at that. He was still thinking about it when, 3 days later, on a Tuesday evening in October with the building empty and the corridor smelling of the lemon cleaning product he used on the second-floor tile, he stepped into room 214, picked up the chalk and finished the equation. He worked quickly, from memory, the way he always worked. No hesitation, no scratched-out false starts. Just the clean sequential logic he had been carrying in his head since September. It took him 11 minutes. He stepped back and looked at what he had done. It was correct. He was certain of it, the way he was certain of very few things that didn't involve mathematics. He set the chalk in the tray. He picked up his cart. He went back into the corridor. He did not tell anyone. Not that night. But on Thursday morning, before his first floor sweep, he made a phone call to a man named Walter Okafor, who had been his academic advisor at a different university a long time ago, and who had never stopped tracking what Marcus Hale was capable of. "It's done," Marcus said. "All of it?" Walter said. "All of it." There was a silence on the line that held a great deal of history in it. "All right," Walter said finally. "Then let's talk." The story of how Marcus Hale ended up pushing a mop in Dormer Hall was not a story of failure. That was the part that people always got wrong when they eventually learned it, and their getting it wrong was a kind of education in how people needed failure to explain the presence of certain men in certain places. What it was, in fact, was a story of choice. Marcus had graduated from Howard University at 22 with a degree in applied mathematics. He had spent 3 years in a doctoral program at the University of Virginia before withdrawing, not because he couldn't do the work, which he could, but because of a sequence of events involving a research grant. A senior faculty member named Elkins, who had taken Marcus's original proof structure and submitted it under a departmental name with Marcus's contribution reduced to an acknowledgement, footnote, and a formal complaint process that had moved the way formal complaint processes moved in institutions that had been protecting their own since before Marcus was born. He had left. He had been 26. The years between 26 and 39 were not idle. He had consulted privately, cryptography, optimization modeling, logistics infrastructure. He had done well enough. But academia had left a wound that had not fully closed, and the shape of that wound had kept him close to the thing that made it, the way certain men stay near the thing that hurt them, because leaving entirely means admitting it was larger than they were. Dormer Hall was, in its strange way, his choice. He could see the chalkboard. He could stay close to the work without owing anything to anyone. His notebook at home, he had 47 of them, shelved in order by year, held 11 years of problems he had worked on alone, including 2 original proofs and a series of solutions to open problems in number theory that he had shared with no one except Walter Okafor, who had been quietly, methodically, and with Marcus's gradual and reluctant permission, building a case. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus met Walter at a coffee shop 3 miles from campus. Walter Okafor was 61, Nigerian-born, a retired department chair from Cornell, who had come out of retirement to consult for 2 academic journals. He was the sharpest person Marcus trusted, which meant he was one of approximately 4 sharp people Marcus trusted. Walter had a folder on the table. "Doctor, Pruitt submitted a paper 2 weeks ago," Walter said, "to the Journal of Applied Mathematics. Peer review turnaround is typically 4 to 6 weeks. The paper presents a solution to the equation in room 214. Marcus looked at him steadily. He was in the building Thursday morning, Walter said, before his 8 o'clock seminar. I finished it Tuesday night. I know. Walter opened the folder. You also solved a related structural problem in your October 2019 notebook that Pruitt published a partial version of in 2021. I've been reviewing your notebooks with Adrienne for the last 8 months. Adrienne was Dr. Adrienne Solis-Kwan, 64, an academic attorney who had spent 20 years litigating intellectual property cases in educational institutions and who had, in Walter's words, the patience of surveying equipment and the instincts of a prosecutor. She was, Marcus had come to understand, the best person for the specific architecture of what he was building. Marcus looked at the folder. He felt something move through him, slow and cold and precise, the way a solution moved through a proof when you finally found the line that resolved everything before it. He photographed the board, Marcus said. It was not a question. Security camera on the second floor, exterior facing. But the interior camera at the south end of the corridor has a partial angle into the room. I've requested the footage. Walter paused. Adrienne has already made that request formally. Marcus nodded. He drank his coffee. He was quiet for a moment in the specific way he had been quiet all his life. Not absent, but occupied, running the structure of something that was not yet visible to the people around him. Start at the beginning, he said. Don't skip steps. Walter almost smiled. That's what I've been doing for 8 months, Marcus. The 2 weeks that followed were ones Marcus would later think of, not as tense, but as technical. There was a precision to them, a series of measured steps executed in the correct order, that he found not stressful, but clarifying. He went to work every morning. He mopped floors. He buffed the second-floor corridor on Tuesday and Thursday as always. He nodded at Dr. Pruitt when they passed each other, and Pruitt nodded back, comfortable and untroubled in the way of a man who had not yet understood what the weather was doing. Adrienne Solis-Kwan worked without noise and with exceptional documentation. She obtained, through formal records requests and the institutional review process she had navigated 100 times. The following: the security footage from the South Corridor camera showing Marcus at the chalkboard on Tuesday evening, Pruitt's building keycard log showing his entry to room 214 at 6:48 on Thursday morning, 41 hours after Marcus's work appeared on the board, Pruitt's paper submission timestamp to the Journal on Friday afternoon, and, through a colleague at the Journal who owed Adrienne a professional debt that went back years, a copy of Pruitt's submitted manuscript, which contained, in its core proof section, a solution structure that was, step by step, identical to what Marcus had written on that board. She had also, in the months prior, worked with Walter to authenticate Marcus's notebooks through a forensic document specialist, paper, ink, composition, binding sequence. The notebooks were genuine. The dates were provable. The October 2019 notebook, in particular, contained work that predated Pruitt's 2021 publication by 14 months. He's done this before, Adrienne said, when the three of them met in her office on the second Friday. Her office was orderly in the way of someone who had stopped tolerating disorder the moment she could afford to. The 2021 paper was the first instance I can document. The proof in your notebook is not similar to his published version. It is the proof, restructured cosmetically. Whoever helped him reformat it did not do a thorough job. Who helped him? Marcus asked. A postdoctoral fellow who has since left the department. She's in Vancouver now. I've been in contact. Adrienne set a photograph on the desk. She was not aware the source material was not Pruitt's. Marcus looked at the photograph. He looked at the file beside it. He's been doing this for at least 6 years, Adrienne said. I can document 3 instances. The board equation will be the 4th, and the most visible, because this time there is a camera, a timestamp, and a witness. The witness was Gerald Obie, a facilities technician who had passed room 214 at 8:17 on Tuesday evening and had seen Marcus at the board. He had thought nothing of it at the time. Marcus was always in the building late, and Gerald's assumption was that Marcus was cleaning the board, not filling it. When Adrienne's investigator had contacted him, Gerald had remembered clearly. He had signed a statement. Marcus sat with all of this for a moment. He thought about his grandmother, about the 47 notebooks on his shelf, about the year he was 26, and had filed a complaint into an institution that had absorbed it without consequence. A mind is a tool. You sharpen it or you let it rust. "What's the timeline?" he said. Adrienne looked at him with the calm precision that was, he had learned, her version of kindness. "The journal will contact Pruitt for revisions within the next 10 days. When they do, we move." Real power, Marcus had long understood, operated on exactly that kind of patience. The department colloquium was held on the first Thursday of every month, in the large seminar room on the third floor of Dormer Hall. It was, by institutional tradition, the place where the department presented its work, a public-facing event, attended by faculty, graduate students, and the occasional dean or administrator who wished to demonstrate engagement with the academic process. Dr. Raymond Pruitt was scheduled to present a preview of his forthcoming publication. Marcus arrived early, in his uniform, with his cart, and cleaned the room with the thorough attention he brought to every surface in that building. He wiped down the seminar table, he straightened the chairs, he cleared the chalk ledge. Then he took a seat in the back row. No one asked him to leave. No one asked him anything at all. The room filled gradually. Graduate students, 2 junior faculty members, the department's administrative coordinator, and, near the front, Dr. Catherine and Becky Ferris, the university's associate provost for academic integrity, whom Adrienne had contacted formally 5 days prior. She sat with the particular stillness of someone who was not here to watch a presentation. Pruitt arrived at 7 minutes past the hour, confident in the way of a man who had never needed to arrive on time. He saw Marcus in the back row and registered him the way he always registered Marcus, as furniture, and turned to his laptop. Walter Okafor was seated near the window. Pruitt had not seen him yet. The presentation began. Pruitt walked through the equation's history, its resistance to conventional approach, the months of effort, the elegant structure of the solution. He used phrases like "after sustained investigation and a methodological breakthrough," and spoke in the measured tone of a man describing something that belonged to him. He was 7 minutes in when Catherine and Becky Ferris raised her hand. Pruitt paused, slightly surprised. "Before you proceed," she said, "I want to make sure the room has full context." She set a folder on the table in front of her. "I've been provided documentation suggesting that the solution you're presenting was derived from work performed by someone else in this building, specifically on the evening of Tuesday, October 14th. I'd like that person to be present for this conversation." She looked toward the back of the room. Every head in the room turned. Marcus stood. He walked to the front of the room with the same measured pace with which he moved through every corridor in that building, deliberate, unhurried, certain of the floor beneath him. He stopped at the chalkboard and picked up the chalk. He wrote his name, Marcus Lamont Hale. Below it he wrote, B.S. Applied Mathematics, Howard University, 2007. Doctoral Candidate, University of Virginia, 2007. 2010. Independent Research, 2010. Present. He set the chalk in the tray and turned to face the room. "I finished this equation," he said, in the quiet, even voice he used for everything that mattered, on the evening of October 14th, between approximately 9 and 9:15 p.m. The security footage from this building documents that. Dr. Pruitt accessed this room 41 hours later. His paper, which I have reviewed through proper channels, reproduces my solution structure step for step. Pruitt had not moved. His face had gone through something, a sequence of adjustments that passed through disbelief and settled into something that looked, to the people who were watching him, like a man recognizing the exact dimensions of what he had walked into. He started. Adrienne Solis Kwan spoke from the third row, where she had been sitting without introduction. "Dr. Pruitt, I represent Mr. Hale in this matter. We have documentation of the October 14th solution, authenticated notebooks showing related work predating your 2021 publication, a signed witness statement, building access records, and a manuscript comparison prepared by two independent mathematicians we retained for this review. The Journal of Applied Mathematics has been contacted and has agreed to pause review of your submission pending an institutional investigation, which Dr. Mbeki Ferris's office opened formally on Monday. The room was very quiet. Walter Okafor spoke from the window side of the room. He introduced himself by name and credential. And then he said simply, "I have known Marcus Hale's work for 17 years. What is on that board is consistent with a mathematical mind I have been watching closely since he was 21 years old." Pruitt looked at Marcus. For the first time in 11 years, he was looking at him. Actually looking, without the furniture exemption, without the comfortable and curiosity that had made him feel safe. What he saw, Marcus thought, was probably not what he had expected. What he saw was a man who had been here the entire time. "I've worked in this building for 11 years, Marcus said, and his voice was exactly what it always was. "I've cleaned this room approximately 400 times. The equation on this board 6 weeks ago was resistant to conventional approach, because the conventional approach was wrong. I saw that the first day it appeared." He paused. "I wasn't hiding. I was just waiting for the right moment to stop being invisible." Pruitt said nothing. His hand, Marcus noticed, was not steady. Catherine Mbeki Ferris gathered her folder and stood. "Dr. Pruitt, I'd like you to come with me." It was not a request. The room watched Raymond Pruitt stand and walk toward the door. He stopped once, just at the threshold, and turned back. What he looked for, in that last moment, Marcus could not have said. Perhaps for something that would make the room less real. Some exit from the shape of what had just happened. The room offered nothing. He left. Marcus stood at the chalkboard for a moment longer. He looked at what he had written, his name, in his own hand, in chalk, on a board in the building where he had spent 11 years being looked through. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about the 47 notebooks. He thought about the way a proof felt when the final line came in clean, when every step before it resolved into the structure it had always been reaching toward. He set the chalk in the tray. He nodded once at Walter. He picked up his jacket and he walked out of the room. He did not look back. 7 months later, the morning light came through the windows of a different office, a corner room on the 4th floor of Hargrove Hall, the university's new Applied Mathematics Annex, recently completed and named for an endowment that had been, in a coincidence that no one in the department discussed openly, announced the same week Raymond Pruitt had submitted his resignation. Marcus sat at a desk that he had not yet fully settled into, with a composition notebook open and a cup of coffee that was still hot. The office had a window that looked out over the campus's old oak row, and in the early morning when the building was mostly quiet, he could hear the particular silence of a space that had not yet taken on the shape of the person who occupied it. It was taking on that shape now. The formal process had moved, as formal processes do, slowly and then all at once. The university's Academic Integrity Panel had reviewed Adrienne's documentation over 6 weeks and had concluded what the documentation clearly established. The Journal of Applied Mathematics had declined to publish Pruitt's submission and had issued a quiet but consequential notice to the field. 2 of Pruitt's prior publications were under review. His resignation had come before the process could become a termination. He was, according to someone who told Walter, consulting privately in Charlotte, doing some kind of corporate training work. A step down. Marcus had heard it without gloating, in the same way he had heard everything in that chapter of his life, as information, filed and released. The university had offered Marcus a visiting research position first then, after a semester in which his work in residence had been reviewed by 5 mathematicians, with more credentials between them than most departments carried collectively, a permanent appointment. The rank was associate. The salary was $94,000 and would be reviewed in 18 months. He had negotiated, with Adrienne's guidance and Walter's quiet satisfaction, a clause that gave him full intellectual property control of any research produced under his own name. He had not taken the clause out of bitterness. He had taken it out of architecture. Some structures you built with an understanding of where the weak points were. Her name was Simone Adeyemi. She was a librarian at the university's Science and Technology branch, patient with complexity, allergic to performance, and possessed of a dry precision in conversation that Marcus had recognized, the first time they had talked for more than 5 minutes, as a kind of intelligence he had not expected to find in that particular room of that particular library. She asked good questions. She did not ask them to fill silence. They had had dinner twice, and both times he had driven home thinking about the conversation, which was, for Marcus, the relevant measure. She was not the point of this story. She was the part that came after the story, which was, in his experience, always the better part. He opened his notebook. He wrote a date at the top of the page. He began. Gerald Obi had been promoted to facilities supervisor in March, a promotion that Marcus had had no official hand in, but had mentioned, in passing, to the right person at the right time. Gerald had been puzzled by the depth of Marcus's satisfaction at this news. Gerald did not yet know the full shape of what his signed statement had contributed to. He would find out eventually. Marcus was patient about that kind of thing. His mother, Clara, had come up from Charlotte for the appointment announcement. She had stood in the hallway outside Hargrove Hall and looked at the name on the door of the corner office and said nothing for a long moment. Then she had patted his arm twice, in the particular way she had patted it since he was small. The floor knew what touched it, she had said. He had laughed. He was still thinking about it now, in the morning quiet of a room that was becoming his. Outside, the oaks were just beginning to turn. The campus was not yet awake. The building was still and clean and full of the particular silence that precedes work. Marcus Hale turned a page and kept going. Some things were worth the patience to build right. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.